You're telling me that the most feared fleet in the galaxy is coming here? To this pathetic little backwater planet? Admiral Zix'Vaan scoffed, his 4 eye stalks quivering with amusement. What a waste of perfectly good fear. Captain Loris straightened her carapace, her mandibles clicking in annoyance. The intelligence is solid, sir. The humans have dispatched the 7th Fleet. ETA is approximately 48 hours. Humans! Zix'Vaan practically spat the word. Always sticking their fleshy noses where they don't belong. What could they possibly want with... What's this place called again? Helvoria Prime, sir. Right. Helvoria Prime. Sounds like a fancy name for a rock with delusions of grandeur. The bridge of the Krath'Var flagship. Inevitable Conquest fell silent as the Admiral paced across the polished obsidian floor. His golden armor reflected the dim purple lighting, casting eerie shadows across his jagged exoskeleton. Tell me again why we should care about this feared fleet. These humans, with their soft bodies and easily punctured organs. His mandibles formed what passed for a smile among the Krath'Var. It's almost adorable that they think they can challenge us. Lieutenant Krav, the youngest officer on the bridge, cleared his throat nervously. Sir, with all due respect, the human 7th Fleet has a reputation. A reputation? The Admiral's laughter was like stones being crushed. For what, bringing snacks and having group hugs? For annihilation, sir, Krav replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. They don't call them the Reapers for nothing. Captain Olivia Torres of the Earth Fleet carrier, Relentless, watched the holographic display of Helvoria Prime rotate slowly above the command table. The blue-green planet looked peaceful from this distance. Hard to imagine it was currently under the brutal occupation of the Krath'Var Dominion. So that's it, huh? Commander Dmitry Volkov said, folding his arms across his broad chest. Doesn't look like much. Neither did Proxima 4, Torres replied, and we all remember how that turned out. Volkov's face darkened. Some of us more than others. Torres nodded, understanding the unspoken grief. She'd lost people at Proxima 4, too. Everyone in the 7th had. Captain! Lieutenant Kaido Nakamura called from his station. Incoming transmission from Fleet Admiral Okonkwo. Put her through, Torres ordered, straightening her uniform jacket. The stern face of Fleet Admiral Imani Okonkwo materialized above the tactical display, replacing the image of Helvoria Prime. Even as a hologram, her presence commanded respect. Captain Torres, status report. We're holding position just outside the Helvorian system, Admiral. All ships accounted for and ready for action. The Krath'Var don't appear to have detected us yet. Good. I don't need to remind you of the stakes here. No, ma'am. The Helvorian refugees were quite clear about what's happening on their homeworld. Okonkwo's expression hardened. This rescue operation has been designated Priority Alpha by the Security Council. Intelligence suggests the Krath'Var are using the Helvorian population for experimentation. A chill ran through the bridge crew. What kind of experimentation? Volkov asked, his Russian accent thickening as it always did when he was angry. The kind that violates every line of the galactic conventions, Okonkwo replied grimly. Genetic manipulation, forced evolutions, biological weapons testing, the works. Torres felt her stomach turn. Sounds like the Krath'Var, all right. There's more, Okonkwo continued. We believe they're specifically targeting Helvorian children. The bridge fell silent. Torres could feel the temperature of the room drop several degrees, not from any environmental controls, but from the cold rage settling into every human present. Well, Torres said finally, her voice dangerously calm. I guess we'll just have to introduce ourselves properly, won't we? Okonkwo's hologram nodded. The 7th Fleet has been given complete operational discretion, Captain. The Diplomatic Corps has already issued the standard warnings and humanitarian requests. They were ignored. They always are, Volkov muttered. You know the protocols, Captain, Okonkwo said. Try to minimize civilian casualties, but the primary objective is the liberation of Helvoria Prime and the cessation of all Krath'Var experimentation activities. Understood, Admiral, Torres replied. And the Krath'Var forces? A grim smile crossed Okonkwo's face. Show them why the 7th Fleet is called the Reapers. Admiral, we've detected unusual gravitational distortions near the outer marker of the system, Lieutenant Krav reported, his claws dancing nervously across his console. Admiral Zix'Vaan waved a dismissive appendage. Probably just another asteroid field. This system is full of space junk. Sir, Captain Loris interjected. The pattern matches known human slipspace signatures. Fine, the Admiral sighed dramatically. Raise shields, power up weapons arrays, standard hostile approach protocols. He settled back into his command throne. Let's see what these terrifying humans look like. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the darkness of space beyond Helvoria's orbit. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality tore open. What began as a pinprick of light rapidly expanded into a swirling vortex of blue-white energy. From within this artificial wormhole emerged the first ships of Earth's 7th Fleet. The bridge of the Inevitable Conquest fell silent as vessel after vessel materialized. First came the destroyers, sleek predatory ships with the hammerhead configuration typical of human naval design. Then the cruisers, their heavy armor plating gleaming dully in the light of Helvoria's sun. Support vessels followed, then the massive bulk of carrier ships, each one capable of launching hundreds of strike craft. And finally, dwarfing them all, the Relentless itself, a supercarrier that seemed to stretch on forever, bristling with weapon emplacements and launch bays. That, Admiral Zix'Vaan said quietly, is significantly more ships than I expected. Captain Loris's voice was tight. Sir, I count 47 capital ships plus support vessels. 48, Lieutenant Krav corrected, his voice cracking. Another just came through. Zix'Vaan rose from his command throne, his exoskeleton making a soft clicking sound as he moved to the view screen. Open a channel. Let's see what these humans want. Captain, we're being hailed by the Krath'Var flagship, Lieutenant Nakamura reported. Torres nodded. On screen. The face, if you could call it that, of Admiral Zix'Vaan appeared on the main display. The Krath'Var commander looked exactly like the briefing hollows, 4 eye stalks protruding from a chitinous head, mandibles framing a mouth full of serrated teeth, and skin that resembled polished obsidian. This is Admiral Zix'Vaan of the Krath'Var Dominion, the alien said, his voice translated by the ship's computers into flat, emotionless English. You are trespassing in Dominion-claimed space. State your purpose or be destroyed. Torres stepped forward. This is Captain Olivia Torres of the Earth Fleet carrier Relentless, commanding the 7th Fleet. We are here on behalf of the United Earth Government and the Galactic Council to demand the immediate withdrawal of all Krath'Var forces from Helvoria Prime, and the release of all Helvorian citizens currently under your care. Zix'Vaan's eye stalks twitched, a sign of amusement, according to the xenopsychology briefings. Captain Torres, perhaps you are unfamiliar with Krath'Var territorial law. Helvoria Prime is now part of the Dominion. Its resources and inhabitants are ours to use as we see fit. And perhaps you're unfamiliar with the Galactic Conventions on Sentient Rights, Torres countered, keeping her voice level, which your use of the Helvorian people violates in approximately 37 different ways. The conventions, Zix'Vaan said dismissively, are a human construct. The Krath'Var Dominion does not recognize their authority. Then perhaps you'll recognize the authority of the 48 capital ships currently aimed at your position, Torres replied with a thin smile. You have 6 hours to begin evacuation procedures. Any Krath'Var vessels or personnel remaining after that time will be considered hostile combatants. Zix'Vaan leaned closer to the screen, his mandibles clicking rapidly. You would risk interstellar war for this insignificant planet? For the people on it? Without hesitation. Even your vaunted 7th Fleet cannot stand against the might of the entire Dominion. Torres smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Would you like to test that theory, Admiral? Because I've got 19 battle groups who'd be happy to run the experiment. Zix'Vaan's eye stalks pulled back, a sign of anger or surprise. You have made a grave miscalculation, Captain Torres. The Krath'Var do not respond to threats. Funny, Torres said. I don't recall making a threat. I simply outlined what's going to happen in the next 6 hours. Whether it happens the easy way or the hard way is entirely up to you. She made a cutting motion across her throat, and Lieutenant Nakamura terminated the connection. Well, Commander Volkov said after a moment, that went about as expected. Torres nodded. Begin deployment. I want our ships in standard liberation formation. Alert all ground forces to prepare for planetary assault. You think they'll actually leave? Nakamura asked. Not a chance in hell, Torres replied. But now they can't say we didn't warn them. Arrogant flesh bags! Admiral Zix'Vaan slammed his armored fist against the tactical display, cracking the hardened glass. Do they have any idea who they're dealing with? Captain Loris approached cautiously. Sir, perhaps we should consider a tactical withdrawal. The human force significantly outnumbers our current deployment. Withdraw? Zix'Vaan whirled on her, all 4 eyes blazing. The Krath'Var do not retreat. Especially not from soft-skinned mammals who think their metal ships make them our equals. Of course not, sir. Loris backpedaled quickly. I merely suggested. I know what you suggested, Captain. Zix'Vaan cut her off. And such cowardice is beneath an officer of the Dominion. He turned to Lieutenant Krav. Signal the fleet. All vessels to battle stations. And contact the surface. Tell Director Moxthal to accelerate the final phase of the project. If the humans want to play savior, let them try to save a planet of monsters. Lieutenant Krav hesitated. Sir, the test subjects aren't stable yet. Director Moxthal reported that full genomic integration requires at least another solar cycle. Then he should work faster, Zix'Vaan snapped. If we can't hold this planet, we'll make sure the humans regret taking it from us. Deep beneath the surface of Helvoria Prime, in a facility carved into the living rock of the planet's largest continent, Director Moxthal received the Admiral's orders with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The chief scientist of the Krath'Var Dominion's Biological Weapons Division looked over the rows of transparent pods lining the walls of the cavernous laboratory. Each contained a Helvorian, man, woman, or child, floating in a nutrient solution, bodies twisted and changed by the genetic modifications being forced upon them. Accelerate the process, he murmured to himself, six-fingered hands dancing across the control panel. Fascinating. His assistant, a younger Krath'Var named Vex'Lear, approached nervously. Director, is that wise? The integration protocols require precise timing. Rushing could lead to catastrophic cellular breakdown. It could also lead to breakthrough, Moxthal replied, mandibles forming the Krath'Var equivalent of a smile. Science advances through risk, Vex'Lear. Besides, our esteemed Admiral has given us no choice. The humans are coming. The humans, Vex'Lear repeated, a tremor in his voice. The Seventh Fleet. Moxthal glanced at his assistant. Don't tell me you believe those ridiculous stories. The Reapers. Such primitive mythologizing. They destroyed the entire Zith'Kree battle fleet at Proxima 4, Vex'Lear said. Over 300 ships, gone in less than 6 hours. The Zith'Kree are invertebrates, both literally and figuratively, Moxthal dismissed. We are Krath'Var. We are the apex predators of this galaxy. He turned back to the control panel and began inputting commands. Throughout the vast chamber, the fluid in the pods began to change color, shifting from clear to a sickly greenish hue. The Helvorians inside twitched and convulsed as the accelerated genetic modifications took hold. Begin the awakening sequence, Moxthal ordered. Let's see what our new weapons can do. The first indication that something was very wrong came when the Krath'Var fleet began to pull back from Helvoria's orbit, withdrawing to the far side of the planet's largest moon. They're retreating? Commander Volkov asked, watching the tactical display with suspicion. That doesn't seem like the Krath'Var. No, Torres agreed. It doesn't. She turned to Lieutenant Nakamura. Any communications from the surface? Nothing on standard frequencies, Captain, Nakamura replied. Wait, I'm picking up something strange on the emergency bands. I'm not sure what it is. Put it through, Torres ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life, filling the air with a sound that made everyone's skin crawl. It wasn't quite screaming, wasn't quite speech. Something in between, a chorus of voices howling in agony and rage. What the hell is that? Volkov whispered. Before anyone could answer, the tactical officer, Lieutenant Harper, called out. Captain, we've got multiple heat signatures launching from the surface. Hundreds of them. Krath'Var ships? Torres asked, moving quickly to Harper's station. Negative, Harper replied, frowning at her display. I don't know what they are. Organic signatures, but moving too fast for normal life forms. And the radiation readings are off the charts. Torres stared at the screen, watching as swarms of unidentified objects rose from Helvoria's surface. Get me Admiral Okonkwo, now! Fleet Admiral Imani Okonkwo's expression grew grimmer with each new piece of information. Biological weapons, she said finally. It has to be. Intelligence suggested they were experimenting on the Helvorians, but this... She shook her head. This is genocide. What are your orders, Admiral? Torres asked, keeping her voice steady despite the horror churning in her gut. Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was like steel. The Helvorian government in exile has been consulted. They've made the hardest decision any leadership can face. Torres felt a cold weight settle in her chest. Scorched earth. Okonkwo nodded once. Planetary containment protocols are now in effect. Nothing leaves that atmosphere, Captain. Nothing. If those things are what we think they are, Helvorians forcibly mutated into living weapons, then we cannot allow them to spread. And the surviving population? Torres asked, already knowing the answer. Initial scans suggest the contamination is widespread, Okonkwo replied, her voice professionally detached, though Torres could see the pain in her eyes. The Helvorian leadership believes that mercy may be the only gift we can offer their people now. The bridge was silent, the weight of what was being authorized settling over everyone present. Captain, Okonkwo said quietly, I understand if you wish to formally protest this order. Torres straightened her shoulders. No, Admiral, the 7th Fleet will carry out its duty. She paused. But we're going to make damn sure the Krath'Var don't escape. They started this. They don't get to walk away from it. Agreed, Okonkwo said grimly. Execute Operation Mercy Shield, Captain, and may whatever gods exist forgive us. What do you mean, containment protocols? Admiral Zix'Vaan roared. The weapons are working perfectly. The humans are in disarray. Captain Loris's mandibles clicked nervously. Sir, our sensors indicate the human fleet is deploying in a full orbital blockade pattern. They're not retreating. They're sealing the planet. And our test subjects? The modified Helvorians have engaged with the first wave of human dropships, Loris reported. Initial combat effectiveness exceeds predictions. However, she hesitated. However what? Zix'Vaan demanded. They're not following control protocols, sir. Director Moxthal reports that the acceleration of the final phase has resulted in unexpected psychological effects. The subjects are attacking indiscriminately, Krath'Var forces included. Zix'Vaan waved dismissively. Acceptable losses. Once the humans are dealt with, we can always re-establish control. He moved to the tactical display. What about our fleet? Are we in position to break through the human blockade if necessary? Lieutenant Krav looked up from his station, his carapace pale. Sir, the humans are deploying planetary pacification platforms. The bridge fell silent. Planetary pacification platforms, or P3s as they were commonly known, were the most terrifying weapons in humanity's arsenal. Developed after the Centauri conflict, each platform was capable of sterilizing 1/4 of a planet's surface through a combination of kinetic bombardment and specialized radiation. They wouldn't dare, Zix'Vaan whispered. Even humans aren't that barbaric. Sir, Loris said quietly. The first platform has just activated its targeting sequence. P3 platforms in final deployment positions, Lieutenant Harper reported. Targeting solutions locked. Awaiting your command, Captain. Torres stared at the tactical display, at the beautiful blue-green world that was about to become a cemetery. Status of Krath'Var fleet. Still holding position behind Helvoria's moon, Commander Volkov replied. They seem to be waiting to see what we'll do. And the surface? Lieutenant Nakamura cleared his throat. The modified Helvorians have overrun 3 major population centers. They're spreading rapidly, and sir, the unmodified civilians are fighting back. They're being slaughtered. Torres closed her eyes briefly. Come, patch me through to Admiral Zix'Vaan, one last time. Nakamura nodded, fingers flying over his console. A moment later, the Krath'Var Admiral's face appeared on the main screen. Captain Torres, Zix'Vaan said, his voice artificially calm. Have you come to surrender? Torres almost laughed at the absurdity. No, Admiral, I've come to offer you a choice. A choice? Zix'Vaan's eye stalks twitched with interest. Option 1. You and your entire fleet surrender immediately. You will be tried for crimes against sentience, and your leadership will likely spend the rest of their natural lives in maximum security containment. And option 2, I presume, involves our glorious deaths in battle? Zix'Vaan asked sarcastically. No, Torres replied coldly. Option 2 is that you watch. She nodded to Nakamura, who split the screen, half showing Zix'Vaan, half showing a live feed from the planet's surface. The scene was nightmarish. Transformed Helvorians, their bodies twisted into grotesque new forms, rampaging through the streets of what had once been a beautiful city. Some flew on mutated wings, others bounded on powerful hind legs. All were killing indiscriminately. Krath'Var soldiers, untransformed Helvorians, even each other. This is what you've created, Torres said quietly. And this is what we're about to destroy. I wanted you to see it. I wanted you to know that every death, every life extinguished today, is because of you. Zix'Vaan's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. You're bluffing. Even humans wouldn't destroy an entire planet. To stop what you've unleashed? To prevent it from spreading to other worlds? Torres leaned closer to the screen. Watch us. She cut the connection and turned to Lieutenant Harper. Execute firing sequence. From orbit, it began with light. 4 brilliant flashes as the P3 platforms unleashed their primary payloads. Massive tungsten rods, accelerated to near-relativistic speeds, struck Helvoria's surface with the force of nuclear weapons. The kinetic impacts alone would have been devastating, but they were merely the delivery system for what came next. Specialized radiation bloomed from each impact site, designed to target and destroy specific genetic markers. In this case, both the natural Helvorian genome and the twisted modifications the Krath'Var had forced upon them. It was a clean death, if such a thing existed. Cellular breakdown at an accelerated rate. Painless unconsciousness followed swiftly by total organic failure. Within an hour, 90% of all life on Helvoria Prime ceased to exist. The Krath'Var watched from behind the moon, stunned into silence by the methodical destruction of an entire world. When it was over, when the radiation had run its course and the planet below was nothing but a sterile husk, Admiral Zix'Vaan received another transmission from the Relentless. "You see now what we're capable of," Captain Torres said, her face ashen but her voice steady. "This is what you forced us to do. Remember that, Admiral. Remember that the Krath'Var Dominion isn't the apex predator of this galaxy. We are." The transmission ended, and in its place appeared a simple text message: "Surrender or follow." Admiral Zix'Vaan, conqueror of 17 star systems and the most decorated military commander in Krath'Var history, looked at the dead world on his view screen. Then he looked at his officers, saw the fear in their postures. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Stand down all weapons. Prepare to surrender." 2 days later, in the officers' mess of the Relentless, Captain Torres sat alone, staring at a glass of whiskey she hadn't touched. The room was empty, by design or coincidence she wasn't sure. Perhaps her crew sensed she needed space. The sound of the door opening broke her reverie. Commander Volkov entered, his own face haggard with exhaustion and grief. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Torres gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Free galaxy." Volkov sat heavily, placing his own untouched glass on the table. "The Krath'Var prisoners have been transferred to the holding ships. We'll rendezvous with the prison transport at Arcturus Station in 3 days. Torres nodded absently. "And Admiral Zix'Vaan?" "In solitary. Hasn't said a word since his surrender." "Good." They sat in silence for a long moment. "It was the right call," Volkov said finally. "You know that, right? If those things had gotten off-world—" "I know," Torres cut him off. "I know it was the right call. The only call." She finally picked up her glass, staring at the amber liquid. "Doesn't make it any easier to live with." "No," Volkov agreed. "It doesn't." Lieutenant Nakamura appeared in the doorway, hesitating when he saw the 2 officers. "Captain, sorry to interrupt, but there's a transmission coming in from Helvorian High Command. What's left of it, anyway. They're requesting to speak with you personally." Torres sighed, putting down her still full glass. "Put it through to my quarters. I'll be right there." After Nakamura left, Torres stood, straightening her uniform. "What do you say to people after you've sterilized their homeworld?" she asked quietly. "Even if it was the only way to save the rest of them?" Volkov looked up at her, his eyes tired but clear. "You tell them the truth. That it was a choice between unimaginable horror and unimaginable loss. That sometimes, in this vast, dangerous universe, the best we can do is choose the path that leaves room for a future, even if that future has to be built from ashes." Torres nodded slowly. "That's surprisingly poetic for a grumpy Russian." A ghost of a smile crossed Volkov's face. "We Russians understand tragedy better than most." "I suppose you do," Torres replied. She straightened her shoulders. "Wish me luck." "You don't need luck, Captain," Volkov said as she turned to leave. "You just need to remember why we did it. Why the 7th Fleet exists at all." Torres paused at the door. "And why is that, Commander?" "To make sure that when someone screams into the darkness, someone answers." 1 month later, Admiral Zix'Vaan found himself in a sterile white room, seated across from a human he didn't recognize. Not military. This one wore civilian clothes, with no insignia of rank or unit. "My name is Dr. Elijah Kumar," the human said. "I'm with the Xenopsychology Division of the Galactic Council." Zix'Vaan said nothing. He hadn't spoken since giving the surrender order. What was there to say? "I'm here to evaluate your mental state," Dr. Kumar continued, seemingly unperturbed by the silence. "And to try to understand." "Understand what?" Zix'Vaan asked, his voice rough from disuse. Dr. Kumar looked mildly surprised that the Admiral had spoken. Why the Krath'Var Dominion thought it was acceptable to experiment on sentient beings. Why you believe that turning an entire species into living weapons was justified. Zix'Vaan's mandibles clicked once. "You wouldn't understand. Humans with your morality." He made the word sound like a disease. Try me, Kumar said, leaning forward. I've spent my career studying non-human psychology. I've learned that most actions, even ones that seem monstrous to other species, have an internal logic. Zix'Vaan stared at the human for a long moment. The strong survive. The weak serve or perish. This is the way of the universe. The only truth that matters. The Helvorians were weak. We sought to make them useful. By torturing them? By twisting their very genetic code? By improving them, Zix'Vaan corrected. They were small, fragile creatures. We would have made them powerful. Without their consent. Consent, Zix'Vaan scoffed. Another human concept with no basis in reality. Does a predator seek consent from its prey? Does a storm ask permission before it destroys? Dr. Kumar studied the Krath'Var thoughtfully. And yet, when faced with a stronger predator, with the 7th Fleet, you surrendered rather than die fighting. Curious behavior for one who believes so firmly in the rule of the strong. Zix'Vaan's eye stalks pulled back sharply. Uns. You think I fear death? I surrendered because I wished to understand. Understand what? How a species so soft, so concerned with concepts like mercy and rights and consent could do what you did to Helvoria Prime. Zix'Vaan leaned forward. You destroyed an entire world without hesitation. You committed genocide more efficiently than any Krath'Var fleet ever has. And yet you sit in judgment of us? Dr. Kumar was silent for a moment. The difference, Admiral Zix'Vaan, is that we didn't want to do it. Every human involved in that decision carries the weight of it. They will for the rest of their lives. He paused. And we didn't do it to conquer or to prove our strength. We did it to prevent greater suffering, to stop what you started from spreading across the galaxy. A noble justification, Zix'Vaan said mockingly. But the result is the same. A dead world and billions of extinguished lives. Perhaps humans and Krath'Var are not so different after all. Perhaps not, Kumar agreed, surprising the Admiral. We're both capable of terrible destruction. The difference is in why we use that capability, and how we live with the consequences. He stood. Thank you for speaking with me, Admiral. I believe I have what I need for my preliminary evaluation. As he turned to leave, Zix'Vaan called after him. Tell me, Doctor, what will become of me? Public execution? Life imprisonment? Kumar paused at the door. That's for the tribunal to decide. But if it were up to me, I'd make you help rebuild what you destroyed. Not Helvoria Prime. That's beyond saving. But the Helvorian people. The survivors from their colonies. I'd have you work alongside them. Learn their names, their customs, their hopes. I'd have you face, every day, the consequences of what you believed was your right as the strong. A fate worse than death, Zix'Vaan said bitterly. No, Kumar replied. A chance at redemption, something your philosophy doesn't account for but which humans consider essential. He smiled slightly. Food for thought, Admiral. 5 years later, on a small moon orbiting a gas giant in the Helvorian system, a ceremony was taking place. A memorial, simple but elegant, was being dedicated to the billions lost when Helvoria Prime was sterilized. Captain, now Admiral, Olivia Torres stood among the assembled dignitaries, watching as the Helvorian president unveiled the monument, a sphere of polished black stone, representing their lost homeworld, cradled in hands carved from the native white granite of their new home. We gather today not only to remember what was lost, President Talia Knox said, her voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd, but to celebrate what was saved. Our species endures because of difficult choices made in our darkest hour. We have not forgotten Helvoria Prime, nor will we ever forget, but neither will we be defined solely by its loss. Torres felt a presence beside her and turned to find Commander, now Captain, Volkov standing at her side. Nice speech, he said quietly. Yes, Torres agreed. She has a gift for finding hope in tragedy. A useful skill these days. Volkov nodded toward a figure standing apart from the main crowd. A Krath'Var, his once golden armor replaced by simple civilian clothes, his posture subdued. I'm still not sure how I feel about him being here. Torres followed his gaze to the former Admiral Zix'Vaan. The Helvorians invited him, part of their reconciliation process, apparently. Reconciliation, Volkov said skeptically. After what he did? After what we all did, Torres corrected gently. The Helvorians have chosen a different path than vengeance. Who are we to question it? They fell silent as President Knox continued her speech, outlining plans for the future, a new homeworld, new alliances, new possibilities. When the ceremony concluded, Torres found herself approached by Zix'Vaan himself. The former admiral looked aged beyond his years, his once gleaming exoskeleton now dull, his movements hesitant. "Admiral Torres," he said, inclining his head in a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable years before. "Former Admiral Zix'Vaan," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. "I admit, I'm surprised to see you here." "No more surprised than I am to be here," he said. "The Helvorians. They asked me to help with the agricultural adaptations for their new settlement." Torres studied him carefully. "And how do you find your new role?" Zix'Vaan was quiet for a moment. Challenging, humbling. His mandibles clicked softly. "Necessary." Before Torres could respond, a small Helvorian child ran up to Zix'Vaan, tugging at his arm. "Teacher Zix! Teacher Zix! Mom says it's time for the planting ceremony. You promised to show me how to use the soil analyzer." The child's eyes, large, luminous, and the characteristic silver of Helvorians, showed no fear of the once feared conqueror. Torres couldn't hide her surprise at the interaction, a fact that Zix'Vaan noted with what might have been embarrassment. "Mikal is one of my students," he explained, resting one clawed hand gently on the child's shoulder. "I teach xenobiology and agricultural science at the new academy." "He knows all about dirt," the child exclaimed with the misplaced enthusiasm only the very young can muster for such topics. "And how to make things grow even when they don't want to." "That's quite a skill," Torres replied, finding herself at a rare loss for words. Zix'Vaan bent down, a posture of submission and accessibility that would have been unthinkable for a Krath'Var military officer. "Mikal, this is Admiral Torres. She commands the human fleet that—" He paused, clearly searching for appropriate words. "That helped save your people," Torres finished for him, crouching to meet the child at eye level. Mikal stared at her with unabashed curiosity. "Mom says you had to destroy our old home because bad things were happening. She says sometimes you have to burn away the diseased parts to save the whole forest." Torres felt her throat tighten. "Your mom sounds very wise." "She's a xenobotanist," Mikal said proudly, stumbling slightly over the technical term. "She works with Teacher Zix on the new food plants." He tugged insistently at Zix'Vaan's arm again. "Come on! Everyone's waiting!" "You should go," Torres said, straightening up. "Wouldn't want to keep your students waiting." Zix'Vaan hesitated. "Admiral, before I go, there's something I've wanted to say to you for years." His 4 eyes focused intently on her face. "I understand now. What Dr. Kumar tried to explain to me about the difference between our species. It's not that humans are incapable of brutality. Your actions at Helvoria Prime proved otherwise. The difference," he continued, mandibles moving delicately as he chose his words with care, "is that you never wanted the power you wield. You carry it as a burden, not a right. When the Krath'Var encountered weakness, we exploited it because we could. When humans encounter weakness, you shield it, even when that protection requires terrible acts." Torres remained silent, the weight of his words settling uncomfortably on her shoulders. "I thought it made you soft," Zix'Vaan admitted. "Now I know it makes you the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Because you'll do anything. Destroy worlds, annihilate civilizations, even sacrifice yourselves. Not for conquest or glory, but to protect others." He lowered his head slightly. "The Krath'Var feared nothing because we understood nothing. You understand everything, and you fear it all, yet you act anyway." Mikal tugged at his arm again with childish impatience, oblivious to the weight of the moment. "I have to go," Zix'Vaan said, "but I wanted you to know. I finally understand why they call you the Reapers. It's not because you bring death. It's because you decide what must be harvested and what must be preserved." He inclined his head in a formal gesture of respect. "Thank you, Admiral Torres, for making the choice we never could." With that, he allowed himself to be pulled away by the excited child, leaving Torres standing alone by the monument, the black stone of the lost world gleaming in the sunlight of their new one. Volkov materialized at her side, having kept a respectful distance during the exchange. "Well, that was unexpected." "The entire day has been unexpected," Torres replied, watching as Zix'Vaan joined a group of Helvorians across the plaza. "Did you ever imagine this, Dimitri? When we gave the order to deploy the P3s? He shook his head. "Not in a million years." President Knox approached them, her silver eyes bright with a complex mix of emotions that Torres couldn't begin to decipher. Admiral Torres, Captain Volkov, she greeted them. I hope the ceremony wasn't too difficult for you. It was beautiful, Torres assured her. Though I'm not sure we deserve to be here. Knox's expression softened. If anyone deserves to be here, it's you. The 7th Fleet. The ones who answered when we called. She followed Torres's gaze to where Zix'Vaan was demonstrating something to a group of children, his clawed hands moving with surprising gentleness. Ah, I see you've noticed our most controversial resident. I didn't expect to see him here, Torres admitted. Working with children, no less. Redemption takes many forms, Knox said. For the former Admiral, teaching the next generation has proven transformative. The children don't see the monster who ordered atrocities. They just see Teacher Zix, who knows fascinating things about plants and soil chemistry. And you're comfortable with that? Volkov asked, his skepticism evident. Knox considered the question seriously. Comfortable? No, but necessary? Yes. She turned to face them fully. When we lost our homeworld, we had a choice to make. We could define ourselves by that loss, become a people frozen in our grief and rage, or we could define ourselves by what we built from the ashes. The Krath'Var wanted to remake us in their image, to turn us into weapons, she continued. We refused that fate. But we also refused to become weapons of another kind, instruments of endless vengeance. She gestured toward the ceremony taking place across the square, where Helvorian and human children were planting seedlings together, guided by teachers of both species, and one former Krath'Var admiral. This is our answer to what was done to us, Knox said simply. To grow something new. A soft chime sounded, and Knox checked her communications device. Ah, I'm needed for the final blessing. Would you both join us? It would mean a great deal to have the 7th Fleet represented. Volkov looked to Torres, who nodded after only a brief hesitation. We'd be honored, she told the president. As they crossed the plaza, moving toward the gathered crowd, Torres felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a lightening of the burden she'd carried since giving the order that destroyed Helvoria Prime. Not absolution exactly. The weight of billions of lives wasn't something that could ever be fully lifted, but perhaps balance, a sense that from that terrible necessity, something hopeful had emerged. The planting ceremony was simple but profound. Children of various species, mostly Helvorian, but with a scattering of humans and other allies. Each placed a seedling into prepared soil. As they did so, they spoke the name of someone lost when the old world died. A grandparent, a friend, a teacher, a memory preserved as new life took root. When it came time for Mikhail's turn, the young Helvorian stepped forward confidently, cradling his seedling, a rare variety of Helvorian flowering tree that had nearly been lost with the homeworld. Zix'Vaan stood nearby, his posture both protective and deferential as the child worked. I plant this for my father, Torin, Mikhail said clearly, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. Who stayed behind to help others escape. Mom says he's part of the old world now, but he'd be happy to be part of the new one too. Torres felt Volkov stiffen beside her, and she knew they were thinking the same thing. The evacuation ships that had managed to leave before the P3 platforms were deployed. The desperate few who had escaped while others sacrificed themselves to buy time. The missions that the 7th Fleet had protected at all costs, even as they prepared to sterilize the world below. After Mikhail, other children took their turns. The ceremony continued until the final seedling was planted by President Knox herself. For all those unnamed and uncounted, she said solemnly. Those whose stories we may never know, but whose legacy lives on in each of us. May this new forest grow strong on the foundation of their memory. As the formal ceremony concluded, Torres found herself standing somewhat apart from the crowd, watching as people began to mingle and talk. The atmosphere had shifted from solemn remembrance to something more like cautious celebration, not of what had happened, but of what might yet be. Penny for your thoughts, Admiral? Said a familiar voice. Torres turned to find Fleet Admiral Imani Okonkwo standing behind her, now wearing the formal white uniform of the diplomatic corps, rather than the tactical black of Fleet Command. Admiral Okonkwo, Torres said, automatically straightening her posture. I didn't know you were attending. Last-minute decision, Okonkwo replied with a small smile. Some things you need to see in person. She nodded toward the newly planted garden. Impressive, isn't it? 5 years ago, we were making the hardest call of our careers. Now this. It doesn't erase what happened, Torres said quietly. No, Okonkwo agreed. Nothing ever could, but it gives it context. She studied Torres thoughtfully. Still having the dreams? Torres glanced at her sharply. How did you? Because I have them too, Okonkwo said simply. Everyone involved in that decision does. The faces we never saw, the voices we never heard, the lives we ended with a command.
Does it get easier? Torres asked before she could stop herself. Okonkwo's expression was gentle but uncompromising.
No, and it shouldn't. The day it gets easier is the day we become what the Krath'Var were, creatures who destroy without counting the cost. She nodded towards Zix'Vaan, who was helping a group of children water their newly planted seedlings. Even they can learn to count the cost, it seems. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the activity around the memorial garden.
The Security Council is creating a new task force, Okonkwo said finally. Something different from the usual fleet deployments. Less kick down the door and shoot everything that moves. More figure out why the door needs kicking in the first place. Torres raised an eyebrow.
Sounds suspiciously like diplomacy, Admiral.
More like prevention, Okonkwo corrected.
Finding the Helvorias of the galaxy before they become, well, before they need the 7th Fleet's particular brand of intervention. And you're telling me this because...
Because I've recommended you to lead it, Okonkwo said.
You've seen the worst that can happen when we're too late. I think that makes you uniquely qualified to make sure we're early next time. Torres stared at her in disbelief.
You want to promote me out of active fleet command, after everything the 7th has accomplished? I want to promote you to something more important, Okonkwo replied. The 7th Fleet will always be there when we need the big guns, but what if we created something that meant we didn't need them quite so often? Before Torres could respond, Mikal came running up to them, his silver eyes wide with excitement.
Admiral Torres, Teacher Zix says you command the biggest ships in the whole galaxy. Is that true? Can I see them someday? Do they really have cannons that can punch holes in planets? My friend Alana says they do, but I think she's making stuff up because how would a ship even carry a cannon that big and... Whoa there, Torres laughed, kneeling down to the child's level.
That's a lot of questions, buddy. Mikal took a deep breath, visibly trying to contain his enthusiasm.
Sorry, Mom says I ask too many questions sometimes. No such thing as too many questions, Torres assured him.
That's how we learn.
She considered how to answer him. My ships are pretty big, yes, but they're not designed to punch holes in planets. They're designed to protect people who need protecting.
Like us?
Mikal asked, his head tilted curiously.
Torres felt a lump form in her throat. Yes, like you.
Mikal seemed to consider this deeply, with the serious concentration only children can muster. Teacher Zix says you had to do a very hard thing to save everyone else. He says sometimes protectors have to make sacrifices. Torres shot a surprised glance toward Zix'Vaan, who was watching the interaction from a respectful distance. Teacher Zix is right, she said carefully. Sometimes protecting others means doing things you wish you didn't have to do. Mikal nodded sagely, as if this confirmed some private theory. That's what heroes do, though, right? That's what my dad did, too. Before Torres could formulate a response to that, Mikal had another thought. If your ships protect people, does that mean you could come back and visit us again, to make sure we're still safe? Torres glanced up at Okonkwo, who gave her the slightest of nods. Actually, Torres said, I think I might be coming back quite often. Would that be okay with you? Mikal's face lit up.
Yes, and you can see how big our trees get. Teacher Zix says they'll grow as tall as buildings someday, but that'll take hundreds of years. So I'll be really old, but you'll be really old too. So maybe we can both see them together when they're medium-sized at least, and... A Helvorian woman approached, placing a gentle hand on Mikal's shoulder. I see you've been making new friends, she said with a fond smile.
I hope he hasn't been bothering you, Admiral.
Not at all, Torres assured her.
I've been enjoying his questions. I'm Lyra, the woman introduced herself. Mikal's mother, and Teacher Zix's research partner for my sins. This last was said with a wry smile in the direction of the former Admiral, who had approached with uncharacteristic hesitancy.
Admiral Okonkwo, Zix'Vaan acknowledged formally. I didn't realize you were attending. Last-minute decision, Okonkwo replied neutrally.
An awkward silence threatened to descend, broken by Mikal's complete inability to read the room. Mom, Admiral Torres says she's going to visit us a lot. She can see our trees grow. And maybe we can visit her ship someday too, please? Lyra laughed, a sound of genuine warmth that seemed to dispel some of the tension.
We'll see, little one. Right now, it's time for the feast. Why don't you go find your friends? I'll be along shortly.
Mikal looked like he might protest, but a stern look from his mother sent him scampering off toward the other children.
He's remarkable, Torres said honestly.
After everything that's happened, children are resilient, Lyra replied. More so than adults sometimes. They don't carry the same weight of before and after. Her expression grew more serious, though he still has nightmares about the evacuation, about his father. Torres nodded, understanding all too well. The dreams don't stop, but they change eventually. Yes, Lyra agreed. They do. She glanced between the three leaders, 2 human admirals and a former Krath'Var commander, with a hint of amusement.
What a strange gathering this is. If someone had told me 5 years ago that we'd all be standing here. Life takes unexpected turns, Okonkwo said diplomatically.
Indeed it does, Zix'Vaan agreed, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Perhaps I should join the children. The soil analysis demonstration. We'll wait 5 minutes, Lyra interrupted firmly.
She fixed him with a pointed look. There's something that needs to be said, and you've been avoiding it for years. Zix'Vaan's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of distress.
Lyra, this isn't the time or place. It's exactly the time and place, she insisted.
When else will you have both admirals together? She turned to Torres and Okonkwo. He has something to tell you, something important. Zix'Vaan's posture shifted, his usual confidence completely absent. For the first time, Torres could see past the fearsome Krath'Var exterior to the troubled individual beneath. During my work with the Helvorian survivors, he began haltingly, I discovered something that was classified at the highest levels of the Dominion command. Both admirals tensed, years of military training instantly putting them on alert. The experiments on Helvoria Prime, Zix'Vaan continued, his voice dropping to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. They weren't isolated. They were part of a larger program, one that's still active. Where? Okonkwo demanded, all diplomatic pretense evaporating.
I don't know exact locations, Zix'Vaan admitted.
But I know the program codename, Project Genesis, and I know it involves at least 3 other occupied worlds. Torres and Okonkwo exchanged grim looks.
How do you know this? Torres asked. And why tell us now?
Zix'Vaan's mandibles clicked nervously.
The Krath'Var keep genetic records of all species we encounter. As I've been working to help the Helvorians adapt crops to their new home, I needed access to their original genetic baselines. The database contained cross-references to other species I didn't recognize.
He looked directly at Torres.
Species that had the same modification markers that were being tested on the Helvorians. Why are you telling us this? Okonkwo asked, her voice carefully controlled. 5 years ago, you were ready to turn an entire species into living weapons for the Dominion. Zix'Vaan's eyes shifted to Lyra, who stood beside him with quiet strength. Because 5 years ago, I didn't understand the cost. His voice dropped further. And because there are children on those worlds, too. The simple statement hung in the air between them.
Lyra spoke into the silence. He's been trying to find a way to contact Earth authorities for months. When we heard you were coming for the memorial. She shrugged.
It seemed like fate. Torres studied the unlikely pair, the Helvorian scientist and the former Krath'Var admiral. You've been working together on this? We've been working together on many things, Lyra replied with dignity.
Including how to right past wrongs. Okonkwo's analytical mind was already several steps ahead.
Do you have data, coordinates, anything concrete we can use? Some, Zix'Vaan acknowledged.
Not enough, but I know how to get more. How? Torres asked. By going back, he said simply.
By returning to Krath'Var space. That's suicide, Torres protested. You'd be executed as a traitor the moment you crossed the border.
Not if I had the right cover, Zix'Vaan countered.
Not if I appeared to be a prisoner being returned in a diplomatic exchange, one who had valuable intelligence on human fleet movements. The admirals exchanged stunned looks as they realized what he was proposing. You want us to help you fake a prisoner exchange, Okonkwo said flatly.
So you can spy on your own people. To save innocent lives, Zix'Vaan corrected.
To prevent another Helvoria Prime.
It would never work, Torres argued. The Dominion would never believe we'd just hand you back. They would if it was part of a larger negotiation, Zix'Vaan insisted.
There are disputed territories in the Cygnus Reach, resources both sides want. The Dominion has been seeking a diplomatic opening for years.
And you know this how? Okonkwo asked skeptically.
Lyra answered. Because I've been helping him monitor Krath'Var communications. My late husband was a signal intelligence specialist. He left behind tools. The implications of what they were suggesting began to sink in.
A covert operation, using a former enemy as a double agent, potentially preventing atrocities before they required planetary-scale intervention. It was precisely the kind of mission Okonkwo had just been describing. This would need Security Council approval, Okonkwo said slowly. Multiple agency coordination, extensive planning. And it would be incredibly dangerous, Torres added, looking directly at Zix'Vaan. For you, especially. Why risk it? You've built a life here. You're actually doing good work. The admirals exchanged stunned looks as they realized what he was proposing. You want us to help you fake a prisoner exchange, Okonkwo said flatly. So you can spy on your own people. To save innocent lives, Zix'Vaan corrected. To prevent another Helvoria Prime. It would never work, Torres argued. The Dominion would never believe we'd just hand you back. They would if it was part of a larger negotiation, Zix'Vaan insisted. There are disputed territories in the Cygnus Reach, resources both sides want. The Dominion has been seeking a diplomatic opening for years. And you know this how? Okonkwo asked skeptically. Lyra answered. Because I've been helping him monitor Krath'Var communications. My late husband was a signal intelligence specialist. He left behind tools. The implications of what they were suggesting began to sink in. A covert operation, using a former enemy as a double agent, potentially preventing atrocities before they required planetary-scale intervention. It was precisely the kind of mission Okonkwo had just been describing. This would need Security Council approval, Okonkwo said slowly. Multiple agency coordination, extensive planning. And it would be incredibly dangerous, Torres added, looking directly at Zix'Vaan. For you especially. Why risk it? You've built a life here. You're actually doing good work. Zix'Vaan's mandibles clicked softly as he formulated his answer. For 5 years, I've lived with the knowledge of what I participated in. 5 years watching these people I helped destroy, rebuild their lives. 5 years of Mikhail's questions about the universe and his father's sacrifice. His 4 eyes focused intently on the 2 human admirals. You destroyed a world to save a species. I think I can risk 1 life to save worlds. Lyra placed a hand on his armored forearm. Not alone, she said quietly. I have contacts among the surviving Helvorian intelligence community. We've been building a network, preparing. We just needed a way in. And a way out, if things go wrong, Torres pointed out. The 7th Fleet, Zix'Vaan said with something like reverence. The ones who come when no one else will. Torres felt a familiar weight settling onto her shoulders. The responsibility of command, of lives depending on her decisions. But this time it came with something else. Something that felt almost like hope. We should discuss this somewhere more private, Okonkwo said, glancing around at the celebration continuing around them. And with proper security protocols. Agreed, Torres said. But first... She looked toward where Mikhail and the other children were playing near the newly planted memorial garden. Zix'Vaan, you have soil samples to analyze, I believe? The former admiral straightened, understanding her meaning immediately. Indeed, duty calls. He hesitated. You'll consider it? Truly? We'll do more than consider it, Okonkwo promised. Now go be Teacher Zix for a little while longer. The rest can wait until tomorrow. As Zix'Vaan rejoined the children, Lyra lingered a moment longer. He meant what he said, you know, about understanding now, about the difference between your species and his. And what do you think the difference is? Torres asked. Lyra's silver eyes were knowing and ancient despite her youth. The Krath'Var conquer because they can. Humans sacrifice because they must. She smiled faintly. He's learning to be more human every day. As she walked away to join the festivities, Torres turned to Okonkwo. That task force you mentioned, the prevention initiative. Okonkwo nodded. I think I'd like to hear more about it, Torres said thoughtfully. Okonkwo smiled. I thought you might. 6 months later, in the cold darkness of space at the edge of Krath'Var territory, a small diplomatic vessel prepared to dock with a Dominion cruiser. On the bridge of the human ship, Admiral Olivia Torres stood in her formal whites, watching the final approach. Signal from the Krath'Var ship, Lieutenant Nakamura reported. They're ready to receive the prisoner and the diplomatic packet. Torres nodded. Tell them we're ready to proceed as arranged. The door to the bridge slid open, and 2 security officers escorted Zix'Vaan onto the command deck. The former admiral was in restraints, his once polished exoskeleton now deliberately dulled, his posture carefully crafted to suggest defeat without complete brokenness. In the past months, intelligence specialists had crafted his cover identity with meticulous care. A captured war criminal whose value as an intelligence asset had finally been exhausted, now being traded back to his people in exchange for concessions in the Cygnus Reach. It's time, Torres said simply. Zix'Vaan inclined his head.
So it is. The emergency protocols have been thoroughly memorized, he assured her. If things go badly, I activate the quantum entanglement transmitter. The 7th Fleet comes to do what it does best. Torres stepped closer, lowering her voice. That's the last resort, not the first option. The goal is intelligence gathering, not another conflict. I understand, Admiral. His mandibles formed what she had learned was a Krath'Var smile. I've become quite fond of peace these past years. She reached out, surprising both of them by placing a hand on his armored shoulder. Teacher Zix has students waiting for him to return. Don't forget that. How could I? He replied softly. Mikal made me promise to bring back soil samples from at least 3 different worlds. A signal chimed, indicating the docking was complete. That's your cue, Torres said, stepping back and resuming her formal demeanor. Good luck, Admiral. Former Admiral, he corrected, allowing the security officers to take his arms. Just as you may soon be. Torres raised an eyebrow. The task force isn't official yet. But it will be, Zix'Vaan said with certainty. Because the galaxy needs the 7th Fleet to do more than just arrive when all hope is lost. It needs you to ensure hope is never lost in the first place. As he was led away, Torres returned to the view screen, watching as the airlock cycled, and her unlikeliest ally was handed over to his former comrades, a Trojan horse entering willingly into the fortress. Commander Volkov stepped up beside her. Do you think it will work?
I don't know, Torres admitted.
But I know we have to try. Because that's what humans do? Because that's what people should do, she corrected. Krath'Var, Helvorian, human, doesn't matter. We're all just trying to find our way in this vast, dangerous universe.
She thought of Mikal planting a tree for the father he'd lost.
Of Lyra building a new life alongside her people's former enemy. Of Zix'Vaan willingly walking back into danger to prevent another tragedy. They thought no one would come, she said softly, echoing the desperate call that had brought the 7th Fleet to Helvoria Prime years ago. But maybe next time, someone will be there before they even need to call. Volkov nodded in understanding. From reapers to preventers, quite the career change. Evolution, Torres corrected with a small smile. Just like Teacher Zix would say. On the view screen, the Krath'Var ship began to move away, carrying its precious cargo of hope disguised as defeat. Torres watched until it disappeared into the darkness, then turned to her crew. Set course for Helvorian space, she ordered. We have some tree growth to check on. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the galaxy, humans continued to do what they had always done best. Stepping into the unknown, risking everything. Not because they were fearless, but because they understood exactly what there was to fear. Not because they were warriors born, but because they had learned the true meaning of sacrifice. Not because they were the strongest species, but because they refused to let strength alone determine who survived and who perished. Humanity fuck yeah indeed. End.